Hello again, this is Preheat. Welcome back to another World of Warcraft video. So 10.2 is upon us and players are getting down on their hands and knees, gathering those seeds, planting them, and trying to grind that rep for that juicy augment rune. And this reputation grind, if you're participating in it or if you're not, it's definitely one of the grinds of all time. A lot of players who got in on it early used an exploit to basically slingshot themselves immediately up to 18, 19, even 20 renown. But there are nice little ways that you can easily get to 18 the first week if you just put in a lot of work. But obviously it is a lot of work. And you know, it got me thinking, this rep grind isn't great. I'm not really enjoying it too much, but I do enjoy a good rep grind. And there's been a lot of rep grinds in the past in recent World of Warcraft history that we should talk about to maybe give ourselves some context for how bad this grind actually is. So obviously a long time ago, back in like Vanilla, TBC, Wrath of the Lich King, there were reputation grinds too, and they were terrible, but the game is just so different now. I'm not going to be really including those. And obviously, you know, players are going out in Classic and they're re-experiencing those. I know the Netherwing grind was terrible. Trust me, you don't have to tell me. I did it back in the day. But that's not what we're here for. I know this video is also going to attract a lot of people who are going to say like, oh, Blizzard shouldn't bounce the game around the top 1%. That's not what I'm saying either, right? Obviously, I have my perspective at some points during the expansions that I'm talking about, some of these memories. I was doing World First prep, but that's not what we're talking about here. A lot of players are doing this grind, and very, very few players who are doing it are actually doing World First stuff, right? This is just something that players across the board are doing. If there is player power to be gained from a grind, players are going to do it. Still tell me, though, what your least favorite rep grinds were from back in Classic WoW, and tell me if you think I'm wrong, too, about this stuff. But what we're going to do today is rank the previous modern World of Warcraft rep grinds from benign to completely unbearable, and we're going to talk about all the things that make those rep grinds so interesting. Coming at number 7 is Aberrus, the Shadow Crucible, and this one was super recent, so hopefully you remember it. You know, obviously we went down to the Zerlich Caverns and we grinded with the Loam Niffin to get their rep up. So if you were after professions, this was one that you probably grinded quite a bit, but it didn't really give you too much of a player advantage. There was kind of another thing that I saw people doing too. They basically turn in fish at a certain vendor and try to get Paragon boxes for the other renowns, but this didn't really give you any sort of player advantage to speak of. So honestly, it was a pretty good grind because it was just something that you could do if you wanted to. Although there is a part of me that just kind of yearns to grind, although I may not tell my guildies that. Coming at number 6, I have the Amersoul grind, and this might actually come as a surprise to you, but this one isn't too bad, right? You go out, you do the seeds with the Dream Wardens, you can get your renown up to 18 for the augment rune, you can go all the way up to 20 for the crest. This is one where if you didn't get in on it early and farm up all the infinite rep right away, you probably aren't going to hit 18 until a couple weeks from now, but that's totally fine. And you shouldn't rush to try and get an augment rune. It really doesn't make sense to be grinding this thing unless you're just really FOMOing or you really just want to kind of chase what everyone else is doing. I think it's a peer pressure thing. I don't really see much reason to be grinding this thing, to be honest with you. But if you got in early, you could have just easily, you know, exploited it, got your 18 right away. I know a lot of people have done that on like multiple characters. So yeah, overall, this one isn't too bad, but I will say if you're dead set on getting your augment rune now, after Blizzard has nerfed everything and fixed the exploits, it's going to be a lot of work. And in that case, I'd probably put it at one of the worst grinds. But since I think a lot of players who were serious about this didn't really end up having that happen, they probably already got their rep. I'm going to say it's number 6 for us. Coming at number 5 is Sepulchre of the First Ones, and this was out in Zerth Mortis. Honestly, the prototype for the grinds that we have in Dragonflight. The zone Zerth Mortis was actually pretty awesome. It was fun to be out there, especially once you got your flying unlocked. And the Enlightened rep wasn't too bad. Obviously, there was a pretty big incentive to be grinding this rep because you needed to get the Memory of Unity. That was the item that allowed you to craft your Covenant Legendary on any slot that you wanted. And since we had 2 legendaries available at this point, it was really important that you got that. But really all you needed to do for Zerth Mortis was the initial quest line and then some world quests. Obviously little treasures sprinkled in there as well. It wasn't really too bad. I enjoyed this one, and I think this is actually a pretty good prototype for grinds moving forward. The only reason I have this one above the Dream Wardens grind is because the rollout was a lot less rocky. But yeah, overall this one wasn't too bad, but it definitely required you to log in multiple times a day and get this done. So if you're working at any time when one of those world quests came up for rep, you might have missed your Memory of Unity in the first week. But yeah, overall, it wasn't too bad. The fourth worst grind in Modern World of Warcraft history is Korthia, and I know a lot of you are shuddering just even hearing the word Korthia, but this was the unlock back in Sanctum of Domination. You were working towards the Archivist Codex, trying to get that catalog research, so you could unlock those sockets for your items, put those in for that itty bitty gain, a couple extra secondary stats. Obviously, we also had Covenants to do in this expansion since it was Shadowlands as well. But overall, this grind wasn't all that bad. I actually enjoyed going out to Korthia with my homies, doing the raids. Well, it wasn't really a raid. You just ran around as a raid, killing rares and stuff, doing the daily activities. But I have fond memories of this one. It was a lot of work, though. I know people were like logging in first thing in the morning, getting everything done so they could not get behind while other people were just playing. So I know a lot of people think of this grind as being one of the worst out there, and you're probably not wrong. But as someone who enjoyed the grind and the social aspect of getting on with my guild every morning and just, you know, degenning, killing all the rares and all that stuff first thing, I found it fun. I think it was a lot better than the Maw. Obviously, we're not including Castle Nathria because that was the first patch of the expansion. You have so much time to get that stuff done because, you know, there's not like 1 week before the raid opens, essentially. It might be nostalgia, but I actually remember enjoying Korthia. But obviously that was because I was having fun playing with my friends, and you know, it definitely was a really bad grind. So that is why it is the fourth worst. Coming at number 3, we have Nyalotha, and this has to be one of the worst. I mean, if you did the grind to try and get your character to 100% power in Nyalotha, you know exactly what I'm talking about because there was just so much you had to do. So obviously the first thing is your Heart of Azeroth to your neck. You need to get that thing to level 80. And the best way to do that was just by doing islands on repeat over and over and over again. You know, after level 80, the gain was much smaller. So you didn't really care about that. You just need to get to level 80, but that was already kind of a full-time job. And then on top of that, you also had the Echoes of Nyalotha that you were farming. You also had the legendary cloak that you had to make. You had all of the horrific visions that you had to do for various currencies. Also the Ultima Chord rep, the Rajani rep, going out to the Vale of Eternal Blossoms, doing the quest there in Oldham. It was just so much, and you had to balance all of this while also keeping your mental for the raid. And you also had to prioritize your time and kind of juggle it so that you didn't put too much time into one thing and then miss a big power increase in some other area. I was actually doing Race World First Prep during this patch, so I was doing all this stuff, and I was basically playing like 12 to 16 hours a day, just grinding one character to be able to get it ready for that raid, and was one of the first people to get my neck to level 80. Super proud of that, and had a lot of fun in islands as well. But I mean, it was really just an awful grind, like one of the worst out there. But it's not our worst. We actually still have 2 more to talk about here. Coming at number 2, and this is probably not a surprise, I'm just going to kind of lump the entire expansion together, but it is Legion. Legion was such a grind. You had the AP grind, and it was per spec. So like if you wanted to play multiple specs, you had to grind each and every one of your artifact weapons individually by just doing dungeons on repeat, hopefully doing really quick Dark Heart thickets or Maw of Souls, one of those two. In addition to that, you also need to get your legendaries, and it wasn't really a grind that there was even an end to it. Like you couldn't see when you were going to get your next legendary. You just kind of had to do it until it happened. And in order to get all of your legendaries for this expansion, you had to pretty much play every single day, just constantly doing content. It was really a situation where it was quantity over quality. So you just had to really do as much as you could, and hopefully that you got lucky. If you didn't get lucky, I know some people who like made multiple characters to try and get maybe the first couple legendaries early on. Really, the expansion was terrible until they added the vendor where you could buy the legendaries, and until you had like the tokens where you could get them for your alts. But yeah, I don't think any expansion, at least in my mind, could even compare to Legion in terms of how grindy it was and just how much work you had to put in and how unfair it was too, right? Because some people would get their best legendary right away, and then some people would literally get it last. And there was no control over it. It was completely undeterministic, and it just had to do with luck. You could grind 100 dungeons and get no legendary, and you could go make a new character and do 5 dungeons and get 2. So yeah, I mean, no justice in this one. Complete disaster. I think a lot of players will probably agree that Legion was really, really bad, but still not the worst. We still have 1 more to go. So how do you top Legion? Well, in BFA, there was one raid that had an even worse grind than Legion, and that was Eternal Palace. And the reason why Eternal Palace to me is the worst grind that I've ever had to partake in is because it included all of the greatest hits, right? Number one, you had your island farming. You still had to get your Heart of Azeroth up. Number two, you had this thing called the Nejtar Pearls that you need to farm. And the reason why you need to farm these was for a little min-maxy thing. If you took the pearls and you bought the Benthic gear, it had a special effect on it that basically gave you like some extra damage, but it was completely random, and you wanted to get pieces that were solid and had sockets and tertiaries and all that stuff on them. So the best way to do that was you would just grind a whole bunch of pearls on all your other characters, because these were account bound. And you would send them over to your main, and you would open those crates, and you would just hope and pray that you got the right one. And if you didn't, you would just go back on your alts, farm more of them, and then send them over. It was just completely degenerate. In addition to that, we also had the Mechagon Rustbolt Resistance rep as well. So they added that whole island where Mechagon is. And there was a rep that you could do there. And the reason why you need to go do that rep grind was for the essence you could get from the vendor. If you got revered, you would basically get access to an essence for your Heart of Azeroth that you could slot in. Not every class needed the essence, but at least in the World First Prep, we had to make sure that we had all the essences going in just in case one of them was good, because we never knew, you know, if Blizzard would just randomly buff something at the last second. Now, the Mechagon Island itself was kind of like a quest hub. You could probably compare it to, you know, Emerald Dream right now, but there was one thing about it that really just was the salt in the wound, and that was that pet battles was actually a competitive advantage on this island. If you didn't do your pet battle quests for the rep, you would be behind on the rep, and you would actually get your essence later. So everyone had to have the pets fully locked, and those fights weren't easy. They were actually some of the hardest fights in the game, and which one it was just kind of cycled. But I mean, for us, we basically had a setup, like a guide that told you, like, here are the pets you need, here's the stats they need, here's what you do. We even had like an add-on we used as kind of like an auto battler, where you would just click the button and it would do the right actions to try and win the fight. It was a bit RNG, so sometimes you had to forfeit and try again. But overall, I mean, just like so much work. And then on top of all that, also having to do pet battles for a competitive advantage. And then if you were mage, you were also trying to get your Mechagon bracers, the ones where you would use them and it would reset the cooldown on your Fire Blast. That was also just a huge advantage too. So, I mean, there was just like way too much to grind here, and it included all the worst forms of content, just a terrible implementation, by far the worst grind I've ever taken part in. Obviously, you know, with all of these grinds, you don't actually have to do them. No one has to do them, right? But if there's a competitive advantage there, then players will do it. And I think it's important for Blizzard to consider player time when they make these things. You know, a little grind is good, but maybe don't do another Eternal Palace, please. Just no more Eternal Palace. Anyways, I'm sure a lot of you have very strong opinions about these. Keep in mind, this is just my list. I'm kind of weird. I actually kind of like grinding. I don't know what to say. It's just, you know, it's MMO, right? Like I like to have a competitive advantage over other people playing, but sometimes they take it too far. Sometimes they take it way, way too far. So tell me what you think the worst grinds are. Let me know how you're feeling about the Emerald Dream. And hopefully this gives you a new perspective as you're out there doing your farm work, gathering your seeds, doing all of your other quests and your treasures, all that. Hopefully this gives you a better perspective about how bad things could be if the game was like it used to be. So anyways, thank you all for watching. If you like this content, be sure to give it a thumbs up. And if you want to see more of my content, be sure to subscribe to the channel, ring that notification bell, and hopefully I see you in the next one.